Hi, this is Tim Kirk. Thanks for joining me today, January 14th, for this End Times update. And I want to start out today with a verse to remember what the Lord tells us in His Word, and that's in Amos 3:7. Surely the Lord does nothing unless He reveals His secret to His servants, the prophets. And I bring up this verse just to remind us that as when Jesus came the first time, if you can remember the three wise men that came from afar, however many there were, we don't really know how many there were, but they were aware of the coming of Christ from their studies of the Word and maybe from promptings. We're not sure exactly how that worked, but I'm sure that today the Lord is working very similarly, and that He's put it in the hearts of different people around the world, searching for clues as to where we are in the Word and in the events that we see unfolding around us. So with that in mind, let's take a look at what's going on since the last seminar that I gave on the end times back in June. So the topics today are we're going to talk about the year 5777, which is the year that we are in the Hebraic calendar. Also about President Trump and what's going on with the UN and some signs of Christ's return. First up is the year 577. And as I had previously spoken, we know that the number 7 is very significant in God's Word. It's the number of perfection, completeness, and it's actually the number of God. And it has a great significance. And that we would be in the Hebraic calendar year that ends with the 777, I think is very significant. We're also at the 50th anniversary since Jerusalem unification took place, which is the period of one Jubilee. And in the past I've spoke about the importance of the Jubilee, and also that we are completing 70 Jubilees since the law was given to Moses originally, and 40 Jubilees since Christ was here on the earth the first time. Both 70 and 40 being very important numbers prophetically. I want to share with you also, since we're talking about the Jewish calendar and the Jewish year, there was a prophecy from a rabbi by the name of Judah ben Samuel, who lived a long time ago. He died in the year 1217, and he had a prophecy about Israel. And amazingly, it's been entirely accurate up until now. And so it starts out that the Turks would conquer Jerusalem and rule for 8 Jubilees after his death. And coincidentally enough, that did happen. The 400 years, 8 Jubilees, came to pass starting in the year 1517, which was exactly 300 years after he died, until the year 1917 with the occurrence of the Balfour Accord. So he followed that with the next period of time would be a Jubilee where Jerusalem would be a no man's land for another 50 years. And we saw that happen also in from the year 1917 to 1967. After that, it would be followed by one more Jubilee under the control of the Jews. And we see that happening from 1967 until today. So the next part of his prophecy starts with 217 by the return of the Messiah. So in Israel, this prophecy is widely known, and the Orthodox Jews are very much anticipating the Messiah. although we know that they are not expecting the true Messiah because they missed him the first time and are going to be rudely awakened by the Antichrist. But it's still very interesting to know that they are also looking at this time for the Messiah to come back to the earth. Now, previously I spoke about different videos that have occurred. If you go on YouTube, you can do a search about these trumpet sounds that have been randomly occurring around the globe that are unexplainable. And from different countries, different sources, it's always this loud noise in the background of what's going on. And in this particular video, it was filmed the same day that the year changed on the Hebraic calendar, which was October 2nd of last year for us. So this is their new year coming in, and this is what they heard. Now, as you listen to this, you can also see this cloud appear, mysteriously big circle in the sky. And all of these provide signs for what, we're marking as a very significant year. I don't think it's any coincidence that these noises just appeared during that time period and this circle appeared.
מאיפה זה מגיע? תקשיב. צלם מלמטה. וואו, איפה זה? תביא את הטלפון.
וואו. וואו, מה זה?
So when you see that, you may say, well, somebody could have created that with special effects and posted it and so forth. But then how would you explain the second video, which shows the same event from a different angle with another camera, also filmed at the same time over Jerusalem? Take a look at this. I think that each of these represent supernatural signs that, this is a very significant year. And, part of the reason maybe that the Jews are looking for the return of the Messiah. So also, since the last time that we spoke, we had Hurricane Matthew. And that came eerily close to hitting us. Actually did hit us, but we didn't get the full eye wall effect, where I am actually sitting right now on the central east coast of Florida. And I can tell you firsthand that there were many people that were praying and crying out to the Lord that it wouldn't hit us direct, since it was a Category 4. And if it had hit here, I wouldn't be able to give you this report now because this office wouldn't be here, none of this area would be here. So we're grateful that the Lord heard our prayers and spared us. But the reason that I bring this up in particular is an image that appeared on television, and many of you might have seen it already, this skull image that appeared in radar, and it was just as the eye wall was hitting the country of Haiti. You can look at what appears to be the eye, and it's just coming on board the country of Haiti. And as many of us know, that Haiti has always had problems with demonic oppression and possession and so forth, and that this would appear I just think that it shows that the supernatural forces are battling behind the scenes as things that we might not be able to see, but manifest in strange ways sometimes. The next thing I wanted to talk about is our new president, President Trump, who's scheduled to take office later this week. Just his name alone, Trump, as in trumpet, when I first heard him as a candidate and started seeing things come together, made me question what the role was going to be in the end times, and that he pulled out this miraculous victory at the end that nobody expected him to win. Only, the questions only get deeper on what role. I think it's very ironic that we're so close to the end times, and we have a president of the most powerful country in the United States whose last name is Trump. Many are making a comparison to Cyrus in the prophecy world, and they're taking the verse from Isaiah 45 and saying, comparing him in this way, because he's shown himself to be a friend of Israel, and we're going to talk about a little bit more about that first after I read this. In Isaiah 45, we see that it says, I have raised him up in righteousness, and I will direct all his ways. He shall build my city and let my exiles go free, not for price nor reward, says the Lord of hosts. So how did Trump get in office in the first place? Because there were several, I think 14 different candidates in the Republican primaries that one by one ended up falling under this unconventional candidate. And we got all the way down to the end. It certainly looked like the other candidate was going to win. But in the background, there was a lot of praying going on with Franklin Graham and his tour that went to all of the capitals throughout the United States, where they were met with thousands of people who prayed and cried out to the Lord for these elections, for God's will to be done, for us to turn back towards God, turn back towards morality. And also, the day of the elections, this is a photo of what was going on in Jerusalem, with people praying from Jerusalem for the elections of the United States. So there were obviously many people on their knees and just crying out to the Lord, and I do believe that that had much to do with our new president. And even though he's not perfect, he's certainly going to take us on a different path than the other candidate that was against Israel and would have continued in the same policies and the decline of morality and everything else. So there's a very interesting fact about the first day that he's going to be president in the White House. He will be 70 years, 7 months, and 7 days old. Again, we see this repetition of 777. Very strange indeed. Coincidence? Now, one of the things I mentioned, that he's shown himself to be a friend of Israel. He has surrounded himself by a council of pastors from major churches here in the United States, something that maybe some of you know about but is not getting out into the news. I happen to know one of them because I follow his church very closely, and he's given us a little bit of insight about the meetings. And he has supposedly received the Lord and taking advice from these pastors from the different churches. And one of the things that they recommend is that we, of course, change our relationship with Israel and show, more of the alliance that we've had in the past. And one of the ways that we can show that in a new way is to move the U.S. Embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, which has never been done in the 67 years it's existed, because of all the controversy surrounding the Palestinians and Jerusalem and so forth. And he has promised up front that he was going to do that. And so far, he doesn't seem like a person that falters on when he says something he's going to do. we can trust him to do it. We'll see as time goes on. But that's his intentions, and he sent a team over there to see about where they could set it up. Now, also interesting thing that came out in the Israeli news was that the Sanhedrin had approached him and asked him and Putin about trying to arrange for permissions to build a third temple in Jerusalem. If you follow prophecy at all, you'll know that the plans are already set, that the instruments are already made, that the lineage of priests have been identified through DNA, that the red heifer to do the initial sacrifices has been found and being raised. Everything is in place and could very quickly go up. The only thing that they need is the permission to be able to do that, and I find it very interesting that they would reach out to Putin and now to Trump to see if they could make that happen. After our election, we had unprecedented fires throughout the East Coast in the mountain areas in North Carolina and Tennessee, and these were in the news for quite some time, especially when they came so close and got into Gatlinburg when the winds kicked up, and without notice started burning down hundreds of buildings and killed many people. And why do I bring this up? Well, I think that there's a significant event that happened from this. There was a Dollywood employee who found a burned Bible page after the fires. And the fire burnt right up to the gates of Dollywood, the theme park, did not enter. And as you know, many of you might know that Dolly Parton is a Christian. And the day after, they were cleaning up, and this young man found what he has in his hand is a burnt page from a Bible. His name is, you can find this book. And here's a close-up of what he found. He writes here, I just found this while helping our house and grounds team clean different areas of Dollywood theme park. It was under a bed soaking wet, and obviously it affected him. The verses that he points out are in Joel 1:15. The day of the Lord is near, the day when destruction comes from the Almighty. How terrible that day will be. In 1:19, to you, Lord, I call, for fire has devoured the pastures in the wilderness, and flames have burned up all the trees of the field. 120 and verse 120, even the beasts of the field pant for you, because the water brooks are dried up, and the fire has devoured the pastures of the wilderness. And at the very bottom, Joel 2:1, which is the most significant verse to me, blow ye the trumpet in Zion, and sound an alarm in my holy mountain. Let all the inhabitants of the land tremble, for the day of the Lord cometh, for it's nigh at hand. And I believe that God sends these warnings that many times go unnoticed, but evidently this young man was shaken by it and posted it, and it went viral. And as I mentioned, you can look that up on Facebook if you'd like. But just an incredible warning of the Lord, saying that He's coming back soon. The next topic that I wanted to speak about is Resolution 2334 at the United Nations. And this resolution was snuck in. This happened Christmas Eve, which also happened to be Hanukkah this last year, which in itself was unique. So while everybody was busy celebrating the holidays, the UN was busy at work pumping out a resolution against Israel. And let me share some of what that says. Condemning all measures aimed at altering the demographic composition, character, and status of the Palestinian territory occupied since 1967, including East Jerusalem, including Inter Elia, the construction and expansion of settlements, transfer of Israeli settlers, confiscation of land, demolition of homes, and displacement of Palestinian civilians in violation of international humanitarian law and relevant resolutions. Basically what they're saying here is that Israel is in violation for occupying, as they call it, or existing, whatever you want to call it, East Jerusalem, including the Lamentations Wall and Mount of Olives and other areas, and also the West Bank. And they snuck this in at a time that nobody was looking. And then afterwards, you know, the United States in the past, anytime anything like this has come up against Israel, has always used their veto power. And none of these resolutions get through because the United States, friend of Israel, always vetoes. But this time is different. This time, they didn't veto, they just sat back and crossed their arms. And as a result, it passed. So, what does that mean? Let's look at what it says in Zechariah 12:3. It says, and it shall happen that day that I will make Jerusalem a very heavy stone for all peoples. All who would heave it away will surely be cut in pieces, though all the nations of the earth are gathered against it. So here we can see where it talks about all of the nations of the earth gathered against Israel. And I remember reading this many times in the past, wondering how this could happen, that every single nation would be against Israel. But you know what? It didn't happen to happen that way. As the UN has supposedly gained power as an international governing organization where all of the countries participate and vote, they determine by their voting what the laws are or what the resolutions are, and collectively agree to those resolutions. So just by sitting back and not voting, we become in agreement with this resolution as well as all the other nations. So we see that the prophecy completing here. But it goes way beyond that. After it came out, this happened in the headlines in Israel more than here, that Kerry and the Palestinians had secret meetings. And so Israelis, of course, investigated. They were watching what was going on and came to the conclusion, without doubt, supposedly, that the United States was the author of this resolution, that they used Egypt and New Zealand, Venezuela to present it. Egypt backed out the first time. It was supposed to go on a Thursday, didn't go that day. And then they got New Zealand to step up on Christmas Eve and put it forward as they sat back and watched it go through and turned around and say, well, we didn't do it. We didn't have anything to do with it, which was a total lie. And during some of the interviews with Kerry, he comes out with this statement that Israel cannot be Jewish and democratic, which just goes to show you where their mindset is. These are headlines that I'm reading now. France calls 70 nations to meet on January 15th for a Middle East peace conference in Paris. This is the next event. They're not done yet. Remember that President Obama is a president until January 20th. So he still has the power of the president this week until it changes. And he's not wasting any time and taking advantage of this exit to push this through. So he's gotten together, and in the background, 70 nations, okay? Here again we see the number 70, very significant. Why not 196 of the nations that exist? Why not the 20 greatest powers? Why not the 8 economic superpowers? why 70? Well, because this is biblical. And if you open your Bible and take a look and you know anything about the Bible, that 70 is a very significant number, and that they would come against Israel. This is all going to happen tomorrow, my time. By the time you hear this, it might have already happened. And Obama is going to move to create a Palestinian state at the Paris Mideast Peace Conference, which is obviously not really a peace conference. Ironically enough, Israel's not going to be there. And they're just going to shove this through. They're going to be talking about it. And then another headline came out that the 70 nations will meet in Paris, will publicly commit to dividing the land of Israel. That's the purpose of tomorrow's meeting, the 70 nations. And then it goes beyond that. They have a new resolution already drawn up. It's been secretly identified. Somebody got a hold of it and saw it. And within it, it says the following, that the Western Wall, the Mount of Olives, and all of the Oslo Accord areas, C, B, and A, all of it will now be deemed Palestinian land occupied by Israel. And you can imagine how this is going to go over. Expected to be introduced and passed on January 17th, which is Tuesday. So tomorrow, supposedly they're going to talk about it, finalize the draft, I think, which they already have, but basically put themselves in agreement that they're going to push this through formally on Tuesday. That resolution is expected to recognize the state of Palestine with its borders fixed along the 1949 or pre-67 armistice lines. Unbelievable. So remember previously I told you that Trump is looking for a place to put the embassy and recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. At the same time, the UN and all of their nations are coming against and saying that no, that's occupied territory, it belongs to the Palestinians. So there's a showdown coming. And just yesterday I started collecting more headlines because this is just happening as we speak. Abbott Aid says if Donald Trump moves embassy to Jerusalem, it will cause all-out war, I'm sure. And more than likely the Third World War that we read about in Ezekiel, or in Psalms makes reference, in different places makes reference to the wars that are coming. This headline came out also today. Abbott seeks Putin's help blocking U.S. Embassy move to Jerusalem. So there's behind-the-scenes meetings going on with Abbott meeting with all of these heads of state, trying to get everybody on board with this resolution. Just before I started speaking, not even an hour before, I collected this headline. At the Paris meeting, major powers to warn Trump over Middle East peace. So what they're talking about here is placing the embassy in Jerusalem. They're specifically going to warn him against doing that, advise him not to do it, and that there will be consequences if he does. So we have a showdown coming. You know, the Christians of the United States, the pastors and so forth, we all want to recognize Israel. We want to be on the right side. As we know, the Bible says, if you know, you are blessed those who bless Israel and curse those who don't. And it's in our interest to make sure that we do everything we can to support them. But at the same time, we can see that all of the countries, through this backdoor attempt to shove this resolution through before Obama leaves, it will get written. He won't be able to change it. He will not be able to go undo that resolution. Trump won't. So it'll be down in the history books, and it will have been just like we saw in the scriptures. So let's take a look more of details of what says in the scriptures of what's going to happen in Zechariah. In 14:2 through 4, it says, "For I will gather all the nations to battle against Jerusalem. The city shall be taken, the houses rifled, and the women ravished. Half of the city shall go into captivity, but the remnant of the people shall not be cut off from the city. Then the Lord will go forth and fight against those nations, as he fights in the day of battle. And in that day his seat will stand on the Mount of Olives, which faces Jerusalem on the east. And the Mount of Olives shall split in two from east to west, making a very large valley. Half of the mountain shall move toward the north, and half of it toward the south. So here we see the next chain of events, that the nations come together. Maybe this conflict is going to draw that battle of all the nations coming against Israel. But we know that these are things that are going to happen at the very end of time, during the tribulation time. And when it talks about that the Lord's going to go fight with those nations, this is when we come back from the rapture. That his feet are going to stand on Mount Olives. That's the second coming. We're not going to be here, folks. We're going to be the ones that come back with him. And so that means if this is going to happen in the relatively near future, how much closer the rapture is. I mean, we're literally on the edge of time here as we know it, before the millennial reign. Well, the tribulation starts in the millennial reign. Let's continue and see what it says in Joel, in book 3, 1 and 2. In chapter 3, 1 and 2, it says, "For behold, in those days and at the time when I bring back the captives of Judah and Jerusalem," which he already has, "I will also gather all the nations and bring them down into the valley of Jehoshaphat, and I will enter into judgment with them there on account of my people, my heritage Israel, whom they have scattered among the nations. They have also divided up my land." So the last part where I underline here, they have scattered among the nations, that occurred as from many years before, and over the years since Israel has become recognized as a nation again, they have come back. Where it references in the first verse, bring back the captives of Judah and Jerusalem. So they're back, and now we have, for the first time in history since Israel's been a country again, them dividing up the land. The Lord's not going to tolerate this, and he shows us that he's coming back soon to take care of this. Psalms 83, 1 through 5 reflects upon this. It says, "Do not keep silent, O God. Do not hold your peace, and do not be still, O God. For behold, your enemies make a tumult, and those who hate you have lifted up their head. They have taken crafty counsel against your people, and consulted together against your sheltered one. They have said, Come, and let us cut them off from being a nation, that the name of Israel may be remembered no more. For they have consulted together with one consent. They form a confederacy against you." And we see this actually happening as we speak. Now there's another event I want to speak about, which is a total eclipse that's scheduled for August 21st of this year. And we know from reading the Bible that whenever there was a total eclipse, that was a sign of judgment. And so when I saw this, and I saw the date that this was happening, and it's going from one side of the U.S. all the way across to the other. And it's a total eclipse. So this is a major event. And I was meditating about it, and I wanted to go back and look to see when it had happened before. And I noticed when I got digging that there was a total eclipse on July 9th, 1945, which was the time of the Second World War. So, being a sign of judgment, the Second World War was going on. And not only that, but at that particular time, the nuclear bombs were set off, bringing about the destruction in Japan 1 month later, after that eclipse. So that really got me thinking and, wondering, and I dug back to the further back in time to find out that there was another total eclipse on June 8th, 1918. That total eclipse was during the First World War. So here we have total eclipse, Second World War, total eclipse, First World War, and now we're going to have another total eclipse this summer. The first thing that runs through my mind is this the Third World War? And let's see what happened during that time, June in 1918, because the World War I went on for 4 years. So I did a little bit more research, and I looked, and it says in the middle of 1918, soldiers from all sides began to succumb to a deadly strain of influenza. Troop losses from the flu epidemic soon exceeded combat casualties, especially weakening the hard-pressed German army. The worldwide epidemic lasted for about a year, killing an estimated 20 million persons, and then vanished as strangely as it had appeared. So that happened right after the eclipse. Are they related? I mean, we see in the Bible where judgment is tied to the eclipses, and then we see these events happening. We can only wonder what's in store for August of this year. And the Lord willing, we won't be here. The Lord willing, there'll be a rapture, will happen before, and all these events we'll watch from afar as the tribulation starts to take place. All is not bad news, however. I want to show you this video that was filmed by the Israeli soldiers that are stationed on the border with Syria. If you look at the video here, you can see the wall, which is actually the border. And this was filmed when the ISIS soldiers were trying to come in through the border of Israel. And as you'll see, God is not done yet. He's very much has his hand on these situations. Take a look. So to wrap up, I want to share a picture that happened that I took yesterday as I was getting ready to prepare for this message. I was driving north on 95, and this rainbow appeared, partial rainbow, the brightest that I had ever seen. And you can't really appreciate it that much maybe in the photo, but it was very large and very wide and very bright. And I was thinking about the promises of the Lord, and as I went home and was pondering these things and working on this presentation, this verse came to me to share in Deuteronomy 31:6. It says, "Be strong and of good courage. Do not fear, nor be afraid of them. For the Lord your God, he is the one who goes with you. He will not leave you nor forsake you." And isn't that comforting to know that no matter what happens as we continue to see these events unfold, that he will not leave us, he will not forsake us, he will guide us, he might even take us out of here. This might be the last update that we do, Lord willing. But in the meantime, we're here for a reason. We might, I think we're the last generation. God, we don't get to pick where we live in God's time period. For whatever reason, we're chosen at the very end. But our mission is to get the word out and to tell as many people as we can about Jesus, and to wake up the Christians that are sleeping and going through the motions, and into their churches just doing all kinds of programs and not being aware of what's actually going on, how close we are to the Lord's return. And as we see these events unfolding in our eyes on God's land and with God's people. So I encourage each of you to share this message, to share what you learned today with those around you. Be active, or be building God's kingdom, because he's coming back soon, and we are to be doing his work as he comes back. And we want to take as many people as we can with us. What terrible times are coming. And as we've seen here today, I mean, it's only putting more emphasis on that time is getting closer and closer. So be blessed, be alert, be aware, and please share this word with other people so that we can wake people up and be ready for the Lord's return. And with that, I thank you for listening, and until the next time, have a blessed day.